Hello, everybody. It's your boy Jmulls of Jmulls Gaming here today. Are we being played? No, bear with me here. Xenoblade Chronicles is a series predicated, almost designed, as one meant to usurp your expectations and predictions for what you will get out of it. Xenoblade 1 elects to do this very early on with the death of Fiora and the story going from, we need to stop the Mechons and save the Homs, to, we need to kill all the Mechons in vengeance. And it just keeps going from there. Xenoblade 2 lulls you into a false sense of security with the more standard anime art style and a bunch of comedic tropes, camera angles, and exaggerated facial expressions for comedic relief, or even comedic effect. Then around chapter 5, the game completely flips the table and largely drops all these tropes to tell a compelling and engaging narrative. Once someone told me how Xenoblade 1 messes with your expectations, I realized, oh, this is a series staple, isn't it? And unless I'm completely glaring over something, there isn't anything like that in 3. There's surprises and plot twists, sure, what with Mio and M swapping places, and for their lives to be recycled, everyone in Ionios having their lives be recycled, and the queens being actually trapped, and the ones we see for most of the game those are actually robots. Maybe that counts is what I'm talking about. Maybe that was all of the undermining of expectations that Xenoblade 3 will really have. Maybe that's the case. But see, from my perspective, do you see how that isn't anything like the first two in terms of a grandest scale for the narrative with Subversion? Like, there's a bunch of little pieces here and there. Like, the closest thing you could argue is that maybe you think Noah is a self-insert protagonist, and with Chapter 5 they really add to the character, so I guess you could say they may have subverted your expectations that way. But I think there's a massive something just sitting right under our noses that we may look back in hindsight and say that it was an obvious subversion of expectations. The DLC story. A lot of people, myself included, expect the DLC to be a prequel pertaining to the founders to answer questions like Lucky 7's origins and who the hell Riku is. I have made 2 videos theorizing what the DLC in Xenoblade 4 could really be. I mentioned that theory in my first video, and in my second one I pretty much said, with all the evidence that we have, it seems like it's going to be the founders. Hell, we even had a room in the city depicting the founders or their mentors, and we know a few of them are obviously former Xenoblade characters like Rex, Shulk, and maybe Dunban. It feels like a massive meatball of a prediction that's just slowly drifting across the middle of the plate, waiting to be hit out of the park. And with the unanswered questions remaining in Xenoblade 3 and that room, you can see why a lot of people expect the DLC to be a prequel pertaining to the founders. It's understandable, there's a lot of evidence for it. But the more and more I think about it, the more I go back to what I said right around the time I beat the game. A prequel just doesn't make sense. And every time that I look at all the evidence for a prequel founders-based DLC, I still come back to the fact that in my mind, a prequel doesn't make sense. Why is that? Let's talk about it. The narrative theme and message of Xenoblade 3 is to move on from the present and the past. I've said that before, and not to wallow in it. To always be willing to continue stepping into the future, even if it's an unknown. Even if it's scary. Even if we are happy in the present, we have to be willing to keep marching forward, putting one foot in front of the other. To then have that message, to end the game like you did, with everyone willing to let Ionios and their lives in that world and all the relationships that were formed go. Let it all go. At least for now. To only then do a DLC where you are back in that perpetual present world of Ionios. It feels so wildly counterproductive and contradictory to the message of the game and story to me. And every time I become convinced the DLC is about the founders, that thought just rings in my ears. Every time I wonder who the hell Riku is. What's his backstory? That message comes back to me. Every time I wonder about Lucky 7 and the Sword of Origin, and how they are created, that message comes back to me. It's just that voice in the back of my head saying, hey, we are missing something. This feels obvious to me. Are they really gonna do this? Is this what you expect from Monolith's writing? Is it really? And maybe you can argue that part of the message of Xenoblade 3 and moving on into the future is that some questions will be left unanswered. Some things you wanted to experience will no longer be possible, and you can't dwell on it. You have to move forward. And the more I think about it, the more I am coming to a very simple realization. But a realization nonetheless. Do we even need those answers? Now that sounds weird for a story. Most of the time, especially for a Xenoblade game, you want the answers. You want there to be some logical explanation for why everything is the way it is. You crave answers. It's part of our DNA. You want the answers. And sure, more Riku backstory could recontextualize some things and make him a better character than he already was. But again, do we need it? Because not all stories need to have every question answered. Xenoblade 3 isn't like Xenoblade 2, where Torna feels like it provides a bunch of critical character backstory and development and context to the overall narrative of Xenoblade 2. 3 just doesn't need that. That doesn't make it better or worse, it's just its own thing. It's a separate entity. It's a different story. And I have no doubt that a DLC pertaining to the Founders where Rex and Noah and Shulk all team up in a badass group, I have no doubt that'll be well received. Hell, we may even look back and say, that was so freaking cool, it's fun, I don't care about anything else. And maybe we get some awesome plot reveals with Riku or Lucky 7 or other characters. Maybe we get that. But that voice in the back of my head is still telling me something's wrong here. This feels like it's too easy. It feels like we are being led to believe this. Like we are being pushed in that direction so that Monolith can rip the rug from out under us, topple us over, and then show us this is the story we wanted to tell you, but we had to put you in this mind space where you expect a prequel, where because we made this world of Ionia so cool and engaging and engrossing, you want to be in it, but you have to be willing to step into the future, into that unknown. That was the message of the game. That was the theme. That was the core principle you were supposed to take away from the game. And like I said before, maybe it'll all sound better or more logical in hindsight. But right now, with all the evidence in the Founder's Corner, it feels a little too obvious to me. So, where could the story go from here for the DLC? We all know it's Torna length, so you can fit in a good amount of story, but not nearly as much as a fully fledged Xenoblade game. If it's a follow-up, I imagine it'll be after a time skip of maybe 10 years or so, and maybe pertain to re-establishing contact using light between the worlds of the Bionis and all rest. As we slowly regain our memories of Ionios, or the game starts off with all of us, or maybe the anniversary of the end of Ionios where we come to that age, or at least the main crew, then they get all those memories back. And maybe it ends with us re-establishing connection somehow, and we get a message through and receive a reply, and we cut to credits, all the while a song that has absolutely no regard for our emotional well-being blares, that you will listen to on loop until the end of time, and then even in the afterlife, still find a way to listen to it. Look, let's be honest, that's just the Xenoblade music way. And maybe this video won't age well, and we'll just get that Founders DLC like I said. And maybe it'll be mostly fan service of buff Rex dual-wielding Aegis blades alongside Shulk and Noah as the Founders detailing Riku's origins and the construction of Lucky 7. I won't be upset if that's what we get, but like I said, it would feel contradictory to the plot. But it is very likely. But let's be honest with ourselves here. If it wasn't likely, would it really count as a subversion of expectations if we get something else? Maybe we go back to the start. The evidence certainly seems to indicate that. And maybe our feelings will remain the same. Or maybe we will look back to these days of theory crafting and realize maybe the DLC and the lead up to it was Xenoblade 3's subversion of expectations all along. Maybe that is how we have all been played. Thank you all for tuning in. Hope you all enjoyed that video. Leave a comment down below with your own theories and speculation as to what the DLC will be. Are you still convinced that it will be a Founders? If I had to put money down on it, I would say it is more likely than not to be the Founders. But if it's a follow-up, if it's a sequel story, let's agree to meet up back on this video. Yeah? Let's just all agree to meet up back on this video. Bookmark it. Like it. Subscribe to the channel. Helps me out. And I really appreciate it. Helps me out in the future as well. Again, leave a comment down below with what you think, what your theory, what your opinion is. Would you actually prefer a founder story? Because I would love to hear your perspective. Do you want a story, maybe even further back in time, to right before Ionios, Construction of Origin, perhaps? Do you want that follow-up story in a DLC? Let me know. I'd love to hear your thoughts and hear your opinions. Like I said, while you're down there, please leave a like and subscribe. It really helps the channel out and helps support future content, and I greatly appreciate it. Stay safe out there, everybody. Have a great day, and I'll see you all next time, because this goodbye is not the end. Until we meet again, everybody.